Hi guys, welcome back to another video, or your first video here, I don't know. Welcome if you're new here, welcome either way. This video is going to be my, what is the name of the tag? The reading survey tag, which is essentially a review of my 2023 reading. A lot of people on BookTube, no matter what sort of videos they tend to do tend to film a mid-year book freakout tag, and a lot of people want a comparable tag for the end of the year, and this one I find is a really good one. I tend to use the version that was combined by Books and Lala, so mostly original questions from the original tag creator, followed by some additional questions from Kayla at Books and Lala. So I will go through that. Firstly, how many books did you read in 2023? I read 285. I had the best reading year that I have ever had, as far as I know and have been tracking that. That is not a judgment. That is not to say that in order to be a reader you have to read that much, or you could read 4 books in a year and that's great. All reading is good reading. I don't force myself to read. It's always been a hobby for me. I'm just really happy that I wanted to read that much, and I hope that continues. Question 2 is how many pages did you read? And that adds up to 65,025 pages, which again is excellent for me. I don't normally read that much. It also does mean that my average page count per book is quite low. I read a lot of short fiction, I read a lot of plays, but again, I am so happy with this. By the way, both of those numbers also not only include the novels and plays that I read, but also graphic novels and comics. So that would be a lot lower if that wasn't something that counted, but to me that's still reading. Question 3 is most read genre. I do have a graphic for that, so I will just shift over slightly. I tend to read relatively... I was about to say I read relatively broadly. I don't actually think I do. I mostly read fantasy and contemporary, with fantasy winning pretty much every year, with a sort of smattering of other genres. But fantasy is definitely what I gravitate towards most often. Question 4 is favourite new release, and I have 2 answers for this. Of course I do. And I think for the majority of people on BookTube, people are going to be reading mostly new releases as they are coming out every year. But I am not really in that space in the way that, like, I don't get sent advanced reader copies, I don't have a NetGalley account, and I put new releases on my radar and I sort of get to them when I get to them, and I tend to read a lot more older releases. That being said, I did read a couple of things that came out this year, mostly things that were continuations in series that I already have a great love for. And the first one of those being Lost in the Moment and Found by Shauna Maguire. I love Shauna Maguire's writing and I love this series. In here we follow children who have fallen through magical doors into places where they feel like they truly belong. For whatever reason, they end up back in our world and can't cope mentally, and so get taken into this home where, from the parents' perspective, they are being treated for their hallucinations, where in actual reality they are trying to get back to their doorways. Every other book in the series follows the home that they are staying in, and every other book follows one of the magical worlds. This one is one of those. We are following Nancy, not Nancy, I think it's Ancy. Yes, Ancy. And we've met her before, but this was one of the darker ones, at least to me. I don't normally read sort of dedications and things at the beginning of books, but I really appreciated the fact that Shonen let the reader know that though the main character was going to be in a situation where she faced sexual abuse, that she runs away before anything truly dire occurs to her. And this one was just such a win. I hope that she continues to write series. Each one is so short and just packs such a punch, and just I want these to continue forever. And the other answer I have for that is Alpha of Mortal Flesh. I really love this Darkmoor series by Ben Alderman or Alderson. I should write these things down. They are sort of companion novels that each set up a queer relationship. There's a lot of paranormal creatures, there's a lot of politics going on, and this one in particular I found personally the hardest to read because we are following someone who is trapped in an abusive relationship, and just the ways in which he was adjusting his behaviour in order to prevent further damage. It was just so heartbreaking to see, and the gaslighting and just everything was, it was very difficult to be in the head of that main character, but I loved it and will just continue picking up every book that he writes in the series or that he writes in general. Question 5 is favourite older title, and again I have 2 answers for that, and also both of them are rereads, so they've really cemented themselves to me as all-time favourite. The first of those is Slippery Creatures by KJ Charles. KJ Charles has become an auto-buy author for me. She writes historical fiction that is much more about the quirkiness and the queer relationships than it is about dry, fact-driven historical fiction. This one in particular is following the aftermath of the First World War, where a lot of people with a lot of problems returned to a country that didn't have the resources nor the will to properly take care of the people in the way that that was necessary. We are following Will Darling, who is one of these people who has sort of got off lucky in that he's managed to find a job as a bookseller, and he is suddenly thrust into this mystery by a bunch of people arriving at the bookshop demanding that he pass over a thing which he doesn't know what it is. And this is just great, and I will continue to pick up everything that KJ Charles ever writes. And the other one is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, sometimes written as The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, so that the title wouldn't be confused with the seven husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And this is just such a well-crafted mystery novel. I reread it in order to get more of a feel for the clues that were laid out for the reader before the bigger reveals that happen. And just, I think that this is a mystery novel where I will find something new to gain from it in every read. We are following a main character who wakes up in the middle of the woods, in just like the middle of the night. He has no idea who he is, where he is, why he's out there, and he makes his way back to the house that he's supposedly staying at, makes his way through the day trying to jog his memory, and at the end of the day, Evelyn Hardcastle dies, and he wakes up not only reliving the same day again, but in the body of a different guest, and he is tasked with solving the mystery of Evelyn's murder while also avoiding being taken out himself, and before he runs out of guests. And I think that this is just so good, and I will continue to recommend it. Question 6 is a book that lived up to the hype, and for me that has to be On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Everyone who has read this raves about the writing, and for me this absolutely lives up to the hype. It's a, what's the phrase to describe it? A fictionalized memoir where Ocean is writing a letter to his mother who can't read, and it's so much about his relationship with his mother, him grappling with his sexuality, but there's just so many aspects that he goes into. The prose is so gorgeous. You can tell that it's a novel written by someone who is an incredibly accomplished poet. I'm very excited to get more into his poetry because that's definitely a type of fiction that I've been getting more into recently. And if this one has been intimidating because you don't want to be let down by it, I just pick it up. It's so good. Question 7 is a book that didn't live up to the hype. And talking of poetry, we have a book written in verse, and that is Black Flamingo. So as I start to have less and less young adult fiction in my reads, I tend to be slightly pickier with the ones that I pick up. I heard that this one was a slightly harder hitting young adult novel that has romance in it but isn't actually a romance novel, and it's about a main character who really finds who he is by creating a drag persona for himself, the Black Flamingo. And I really identified with his conversations about sexuality and especially being mixed race. But other than that, I've heard such good thing about it, the prose, and it was just fine for me. So yeah, that one was a bit of a letdown. Question 8 is the book that felt like the biggest accomplishment. Again, I have two answers for this because in one way, and I think this is the longest book I read in 2023, but to me that is an accomplishment because I tend to read very short fiction, but in terms of me wanting to finish out this series, this felt like a big accomplishment. Also because I think the training sequences made this drag in the middle as well, but I needed to get through it because I wouldn't have remembered enough of it from when I originally read it in order to continue on in the series. This is a sort of quintessential fantasy novel or series about dragons and dragon riders, and I think it is a wonderful gateway into high fantasy for younger readers. And I'm very excited with the additional additions to the series that have been coming out more recently. So this felt like a accomplishment because of the fact that it was long. But my other book that felt like an accomplishment was for a different reason, and that is Sadie by Courtney Summers. So as I was getting nearer to the end of this book, I did consider DNFing it, not because I thought it was bad, but because the content was getting very hard to read by the end. And even if I had DNF'd it, I would have still recommended it highly, especially because I had such an emotional response while reading it. I decided to see how I went and just be very aware of my mental state going through it. And I didn't just plow through it with no regard to my mental stability, but it does feel like an accomplishment to have finished this and to be able to recommend it knowing how the book ends and how everything got wrapped up. This gives such a haunting commentary on the violence enacted upon women. And in here we are following Sadie, our main character, who is on a revenge mission to go after the person who was responsible for her sister's death. And we are alternatively following a true crime podcast host who is in real time trying to find her. So this is excellent and I feel very accomplished. Question 9 is favourite new characters, and for that I had to go with A Court of Mist and Fury, especially as if you've read this series you will know, but the first book in the series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, is very much hated by most of, if not all of the fans of this series, and I really enjoyed it. So I was very apprehensive going into the second novel, especially given the fact that a love triangle was introduced, and that's not something I historically like in most genres of fiction. However, this book just, the progression of the characters and their actions was so believable, and the progression of the love triangle was really understandable, and I also supported the main character in that journey. I really loved the journey of healing that she went on in this novel. It was also very exciting, and I'm just considering rereading this before carrying on because I think that was just so well crafted by the author. Question 10 is least favourite characters, and for that I have everyone in the Belinda Blinked series. So yes, I own this. Yes, I technically don't think it's very well written, but it's just such a fun read. So this is a series of very short little novellas. I don't even know if this would class as a novella. I think that it would even be probably a noveletta. And this is the erotic series that is read by the My Dad Wrote a Porno podcast. And the series itself gets a 1. I love the podcast. And hi, Rich. And yeah, it's just a lot of the characters in here are one-dimensional and vapid. Their decisions make no sense, or some of them are just downright horrible people, and that's why they win out. And I'm pretty sure I gave this as my answer last year. Question 11 is the most shocking moment, and the answer to that for me is a book that I read quite early on in the year, and that is Girls and Boys, which is a play. And part of the surprise for me was the fact that it's the author of a play that I know that I've put on my worst books of the year in 2 years while I've been on BookTube, which is DNA. So I had no expectations of this going in. But secondly, there was an aspect of the plot that was really shocking to me. In here, it is a single-hander, so one actor. Essentially, the play is one big monologue performed by one actor, and just the way that those scenes were crafted and the way in which she would set up so much about the relationship and the other people who were there and the one-sided conversations. It was really just such a masterpiece in playwriting, and I never thought I'd say that about the writer of DNA, which is awful. So I was just really shocked by this. Question 12 is favourite new writing, and for that, again, I have to go with On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. Ocean Vuong's writing style is so literary, and I really can't wait to check out his poetry. And I do hope that he comes out with more novel style books, because he's just such a talent. Question 13 is the book that you've pushed the most people to read. Now, often people will answer this question as the book that they mention the most on BookTube, or maybe like something that very commonly gets brought up in tags. But for me, I don't think I have that much influence over what people read. I don't get a lot of views on these videos, which is not something that bothers me at all. I do this for fun. So I interpret this question as books that I've pushed people in my real life to read. So the first one is Millenniagram, which I really enjoyed. It's a non-fiction book about the Enneagram system, which I found out about again from Books and Lola's video that she did on the Millenniagram. It's one of these questionnaire things that makes you fall into a category of person, and I find that the Enneagram traits really describe me very well. Do put down in the comments what Enneagram number you think I am. I don't know, I probably would have said so in my last video about this book, but I recommended it to my sister because I thought she'd enjoy. The next one is Immaculate by Oliver Lansley, which is a play that I forced both my drama group and a couple more of my friends that I met in my drama group read with me, because I just love it so much and I want to see it be performed. The final book that I have on that list is also going to be this one here, which is The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I have now got both of my parents to read that and talk about it with me because I just love it. Question 14 is favourite new author. Now, I struggle to name someone as a favourite author unless I have read multiple things from that author that don't all fall under the same series. And now I have read and loved multiple things. And now I have two. So the first one is KJ Charles. Like I said before, they have really become an author by author for me. So I read and loved all the books in this series. I read Wanted a Gentleman and Wanted an Author. I've read a book called Band Sinister. I've read The Spectred Isle is the first book in the Green Man series. So I've now read multiple books from multiple series from this author, all of which I've given a 4, if not a 5-star. So firm favourite here. The second one being Ben Alderman, which I've already mentioned as well in this video, as I don't think I could have confidently said so just reading books from the Darkmoor universe, but I also read another book by him this year that I cannot remember the name of, and just, yeah, loving that book as well cemented him as a favourite author for me. Question 15 is the book that I will be recommending the most moving forward. Again, this question can be interpreted a number of different ways, one of which I think is the book that I could see myself talking the most about or recommending the most on BookTube because I love it. However, I think I'm going to interpret this question in the other way, which is a book that has the most universal appeal and the book that I think will work for the most people if I recommended it to them. One of those being Kira and Me, a book that I read by Noel Fitzpatrick, who is also known as the Super Vet. I think that this has the potential to work for the same crowd who really love The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. It's a very moving story, told very gently with very little text, but is combined with beautiful images that really bring the story to life. I don't have a copy. The copy that I bought specifically was for my sister, but I could see that really working for others. The second answer to this question that I have is The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, just because I think this is such a well-crafted mystery novel that also works very well on a reread, so this is just a book I see recommending time and time again. Question 16 is favourite cover of 2023, and again, this question could be taken in two different ways, and I will have an answer for both. First of all, of the books that I read in 2023, I have two answers for that. The first being every cover in the Every Heart a Doorway series. The cover artist for this series just knocks it out of the park every time. Every single cover has in some way a door situated in it, and just the artwork is always gorgeous. And also because I reread the series in 2023, I can say all of them. So these are beautiful. And my second being The Language of Thorns. Not that this is technically the cover I mean. So this is a series of short stories, not set in the Shadow and Bone Grisha universe, but more that this is a series of classic fairy tales that might be told by characters in the series or in that universe. And when some of these were released as short stories on their own, they got individual covers, and those I just think are stunning. So I will put them up here on the screen for now. The other way to interpret that question is in terms of books that I bought but not necessarily read in that year. So first of all, I bought a couple of new editions of classics. I collect the Barnes & Noble exclusive leather-bound classics editions, one of which I bought, I believe, this year, if I'm not mistaken, which is Aesop's Fables. This is a book I have read and I do love, and just this edition, I just love the way that they come out with their covers. So I love the fact that I get to have this on my shelf. Running out of room on my stack. The other one being the special edition, all of them really, of the Shadow and Bone trilogy that I got specifically from OwlCrate. These covers are just utterly stunning. The sprayed edges, the quote, the end pages are beautiful. There's art inside them. The foiling on the cover itself, just everything about this was just such a good job by OwlCrate. And these are gorgeous. I think this might actually be the best of the best of the books that I used as answers to this question. Question 17 is a book that made you laugh, and I don't often read specifically comedic books. That's not a subgenre that I find myself gravitating towards, but there were several ones this year which I just loved. I I think I read this book specifically by Julian and Clary in the previous year, but through Audible, I listened to one of his comedy routines. I love Julian and Clary, he's hilarious. In the same vein, a number of works by Eddie Izzard or Susie Izzard are available as audio clips and as physical books, and I again love her comedy style. Dawn French's book, The Twat Files, that she released as part of, or as a result of, writing the script for her touring theatre production that she does. Just, again, I love Dawn French. This really works for me. And two that are fiction, one being the whole of the Belinda Blinked series. This is ludicrous, and the podcast team really do point out the ludicrousness of it, but it just does make me laugh. And finally, we have Kill the Farm Boy, which I can't believe it's taken me this long to bring up as an answer in this question, because I reread it so many times it became such a comfort read for me. This is a fantasy novel that pokes fun of fantasy tropes. We are following a traditional fantasy setup where there is a young farm boy. He is designated as the chosen one by a pixie, and he goes off to find his destiny with his talking animal companion, and an accident occurs, and the rest of the characters in the novel then have to go on the real quest of the novel. And it is so good, and the humour here just works for me so well. Question 18 is a book that made you cry. Now, I don't often cry when I read novels. There are a few occasions to that, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara being one, but so I always adjust this question slightly to be a book that made you sad. So again, it's in this stack, so again, I have a number of books that I could use for this question. One of them being Alpha of Mortal Flesh, just being in the head of that character who is trapped in that relationship. Also Lost in the Moment and Found, like I said, which deals with child assault. But my main book for that is going to be Sadie. Given the fact that the emotional impact this book had meant that I nearly couldn't finish it, I think this has to take the prize for this category. And if you haven't picked this up, I really do highly recommend it. I've been filming for a long time. Question 19 is favourite reread. And surprise, surprise, I have two answers for that. The first being the book that I just mentioned, which is Kill the Farm Boy. 2023 was really my year for rereading, or I really rediscovered the calming effects of rereading something where you already know the outcome and just letting that wash over you. And this I reread multiple times this year. The second one being How I Stole the Princess's White Knight and Turned Him to Villainy by A.J. Sherwood. This one, again, was another one that I just reread so many times in 2023. It follows a white knight who, from the outside perspective, people think that he has the perfect life. He is the loyal and untiring protector of the kingdom's most beautiful and wonderful and kind princess. In reality, she is a complete tyrant, and everything that he does is really to protect the kingdom from her. And we start the novel where one of her orders is going to wipe out an entire town's worth of people. He can't work out a way of solving this on his own, and so he begs the kingdom's most infamous dark sorcerer in order to get his help, and he's not who he seemed either. And I love the relationship that forms in here. This is not serious high fantasy, if that is what you want out of a fantasy novel, but if you want something that's just fun and just has really cozy relationships, this was a lot of fun and I loved it. And the final question, question 20, is the biggest surprise. One of these I have already talked about, and that is Girls and Boys, the play. And yes, it was surprising because of that plot twist that I talked about, but also the fact that despite really hating this author's previous work that I've read by them, which I thought was terribly written and just really terribly done, to the point where I asked some friends of mine to reread it with me to comment on the fact that it was so ridiculously stupid. This one was such a shock that it was so well delivered and well crafted. So that was one shock. The second was a book that I haven't talked about yet, and that is Heartland, mainly because I had absolutely no prior knowledge of this book. I picked it up on a complete whim because it was labelled as queer, and despite the fact that it was really bizarre and strange, I had such a good time with it. It follows a woman who gets dumped by her girlfriend, and then she sort of devolves into an obsession. I can't think of how else to phrase that right now, with the girl that she was dumped for. And she's a really unsavory character to be in the head of, but I just loved this so much, and it just came out of the blue. And there we have it. I didn't realise I was going to be filming for quite that long, but that, I think, is quite a good wrap up of my reading year in general. This, I think, is quite representative of the reading year I had. Let me actually pick up the stack so I can do a bit of a thumbnail. Or maybe I should just have a couple to sort of make some secrets. I'll show a little peek, but yeah. But there you have it. Those are all the answers to the reading survey tag. And I think the thing that I still want to know the most is, what Enneagram number do you think I am? And what is your Enneagram number if you are into said things? And I will see you in my next video. Bye.